We are on air.
Okay, we're live. All right.
Okay. So,
But
hello, Dr. Fisher. My name is Gisberto Evangelisti. I am a spine surgeon from Orthopedic Institute Rizzoli in Bologna.
and I am Victor Martín Gorgojo, an orthopedic surgery resident from Valencia, Spain, and we are both members of the new AO Spine Youth Club.
Well, great to meet you guys.
Good to meet you.
Welcome to the Expert Insight series, where we interview worldwide expert spine surgeons who kindly share their professional and personal experience.
So today we are privileged to interview Dr. Charles Fisher, as professor and former division head of the Combined Neurosurgical and Orthopedic Spine Program at Vancouver General Hospital and the University of British Columbia. Dr. Fisher is a leader in adult spine surgery, specializing in trauma and oncology.
Yes, and his international impact is evident. He's a former chairman of the AO Knowledge Forum Tumors, and he is currently the chairperson of the AO Spine Research Community. Dr. Fisher received the Leon Wills Award in 2019 for excellence in leadership and clinical research in spine care. He has nearly 350 publications and roles in prestigious journals, and Dr. Fisher is a key opinion leader in spine surgery worldwide.
So we are about to discover Dr. Fisher's journey from UCLA soccer scholarship, if we are correct, to his current role as a top spine surgeon. So good morning, Dr. Fisher, and thank you for being with us.
Well, good morning, you guys. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So could you tell us your full name, specialty, and current position?
Yeah, well, my full name's Charles Gregory Fisher, and I'm an adult spine surgeon at Vancouver General Hospital and the University of British Columbia. And I just stepped down about 6 months ago as the professor and head there, which I'm kind of enjoying now, and doing a little bit of mentoring, but not quite the level of responsibility. So that's good, and we've left the division in very good hands with Nicholas Day. So that's my title.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So could you share a bit about your roots? What's your hometown? Could you tell us about if you still play soccer? How is this that we read?
Oh, well, I was born in Montreal, in Quebec, and my dad was in the Navy, so we did a lot of traveling around. But I more or less grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, which is West Coast, so we don't get those severe winters. And I was always involved in a lot of athletics growing up in school. I played almost everything, but probably basketball and soccer were my two sports. And then I ended up being lucky enough to get a scholarship down to UCLA to play soccer there, which isn't that big a deal in the context of European or worldwide soccer, but it was still fun and a great experience.
Okay.
That's great.
And what did you train, and when did you complete your residency? Could you please briefly share with us the initial step for your becoming a spine surgeon?
Yeah, I finished my residency in 1992 at the University of British Columbia, and I guess there was two things I knew I didn't want to do. That was foot and ankle and pediatrics. Although I liked them, it just didn't really turn me on too much. And I think the thing I liked about spine was a lot of immediate gratification, a lot of intricate things, but yet some bigger orthopedic things. And so it was a nice combination of specialty, or a nice combination of different techniques and thinking. And back then there wasn't a lot known about spine. It seemed like the open frontier.
Yeah, that's true.
So I did a fellowship in London, Ontario, with Stu Bailey and Kevin Gurr. And then came back into practice, and then spent some time in Europe in Germany with Jürgen Harms for a couple of weeks. Once I'd been in practice for a while.
Wow.
That's great. And what do you think are the pros and cons of becoming a spine surgeon? What would be the advice for younger like residents that are thinking about getting into this path of neurosurgery or orthopedics?
Yeah, it's changing a lot now. I think more neurosurgeons are drifting towards spine than orthopedic surgeons, and that would be my experience at our residency and our program now. But generally speaking, as a resident, I think you don't necessarily. There's a few that know exactly what they want to do, but most go through uncertain. I think it may be the experience they have on particular rotations or at meetings or people they meet, all have influence on what they choose. But as far as advice is concerned, I think sometimes residents are pedaling too fast and don't sit back and really think about things. I know that was the way with me through most of it. You're kind of in this confined thing with a strict role. You're relatively protected. You have a fair amount of responsibility, but not a lot of independence. And so you're just going, and often you're trapped in operating rooms, not doing a lot. And I think I can think back where I drifted a bit, and I wish I'd talked more and asked more questions. I mean, if I became irritating, I'm sure the surgeon would say to be quiet. And I encourage residents and fellows to ask a lot of questions. It's kind of like when you got your kids in the car, they can't go anywhere. So it's a great time to talk to them. And then that way, I think you could learn a lot. The other thing might be just to go beyond your program. And nowadays, you guys, well, you're out now, but residents, I think, have a tremendous advantage to see what happens in other parts of the world. It's so simple now. Because just like I'm talking to you guys.
Yes, that's true. That was really easy to reach you out by email and to set up this conversation. So I totally agree. Who inspired you the most to become the surgeon you are now in your professional journey? There's a person or another surgeon, but also maybe who there is a person in your life that inspired you the most.
I don't think there's one particular person. It probably changes through different phases of your life and your career. My dad always said, "Do you want to be a doctor?" He had nothing to do with healthcare or anything, but he was a great guy. But it was just a casual thing. I don't even know why he said it. And then my mom had great energy, and then I had some great coaches in sports growing up that taught me a lot of the principles that you utilize as a surgeon. But I think you guys are more interested at the professional level. There was our professor and head, Clive Duncan, was a brilliant orthopedic surgeon, a very objective guy, and tremendous educator. And I'm sure some of your mentors and seniors would know him. He was a hip, knee, and oncology surgeon. So he had a lot of influence in my residency and early in my career. Marcel Dvorak, who's still my partner, was a couple of years ahead of me, was tremendously influential on me understanding, I think, research and academia, and the clinical aspects of things. And then as I went on, On the research side, there was, when I got my master's, Martin Schechter, who was a professor in the Department of Public Health at UBC, had a significant impact. And then as I began to branch out, Stefano Boriani had, a significant impact on the way I thought and learned about tumors, and Zia Gokaslan, another leader in the tumor world. And I'm sure there are many more. I can't say one stood out. They just all, you took little bits from a lot of them.
With the name you said, it looks like you're talking about some your colleagues, but also companion of a journey, because those names that you say then were in the Spine Oncology Study Group and then in the Knowledge Forum. So it looks like you shared part of the life together professionally.
Oh yeah, and so I came in a bit late. Like, I didn't really plan an academic career, and it was interesting that I'm reading about these guys, and then I'm suddenly meeting with them and working with them, and then actually, because of my clinical research expertise that evolved, I was leading a lot of the stuff, and it was a great combination of things. Yeah.
Thank you. So every professional has one memorable case. Could you share a bit about which case do you remember with the most, and the lessons you learned from it?
Yeah, the cases are interesting because not one particular case stays with you forever, because others come along that you have a different perspective of. I think probably my first, I didn't do there wasn't really a spine oncology fellowship back then. I mean, there were, but there were very few. But I remember I got this young girl who had an osteogenic sarcoma at T6, and it was a low grade, somewhere between an osteoblastoma and an osteogenic sarcoma, but it definitely was sarcoma. And she came in when I was on call. She was myelopathic, and a couple of the surgeons said, well, you've got to decompress that. And I kind of went, well, based on musculoskeletal oncologic principles, that wouldn't be a good thing to do. And I was very junior, and there was sort of a lot of pressure. And it was really the neurosurgeons who hadn't necessarily had that degree of background or training, kind of advocating for this, because we've always had a combined program with neuro and orthopedic surgeons. So, and even some of the orthopedic guys were saying, well, you can't do that in an oncologic way anyway. And so I sort of stuck to it, and then with Marcel, we planned the case, and we did a non-block resection of it, and she's still alive now, 24 years later. And
Wow.
So I think that had it gave me some confidence, and sticking with principles. So you come out of and I'm sure you guys experience, you come out of your residency exceedingly confident, as a senior resident, because you're protected, right? And then it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so you think you're invincible and great, and then you are coming out of your fellowship, and you go into practice, and you go, holy shit, like, this is hard, and I don't actually know what's going on. And your confidence starts to going down. And I think the first 2 or 3 years of practice are exceedingly stressful, for a multitude of reasons, right? So I think that case, it went well. In orthopedic training, it's like, of course, with multiple trauma, you play a role, but those are, you screw that case up, she dies, right? So I think I'll always remember that case.
So even if you were young, but you had maybe that strong background in oncology and on the principle, maybe helped you in the right choice. So not to rush in decompression, but to think about the pathology first. Maybe a strong background is always useful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, we teach those principles when you're when you're dealing with oncology to know what you're operating on before you operate. And there are, of course, circumstances where you feel forced and the urgency, the neurologic elements, and the need to decompress, and that's just, you usually, have time for a multitude of reasons, and so it is important to take your pulse and go through the basic principles, right? Find out what the diagnosis is, and then figure out the best thing to do.
Exactly.
Yes, I remember. I remember, and especially in the beginning of my residency, I always want to do surgery. So, and I remember in Italy, my former chief told me, before you need to study to learn the basic theoretically, and then at the end you're going to be in the OR and operating. Yeah, and I did it.
Yeah.
I remember I thought, wow, come on, we are too old school here. We should practice much more. I'm just studying and watching you operating. So this is so annoying. I would like to, but at the end, probably, as your case demonstrate, that's the way, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we have residents who want to do fellowships with us. They come to electives and things, and they're always in the OR. And I, often say, have you been over to the clinic?
As important as they are.
Yeah, the decision making in spine is probably the hardest thing we do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Even in some of the most basic degenerative stuff or basic trauma stuff, a simple thoracolumbar burst fracture, right?
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Or a degenerative spondylolisthesis. I mean, think back to when there was a randomized trial at the end of the 90s saying that you should fuse a degenerative spondylolisthesis, decompress and fuse it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the cage rage started. And so, in 2000 and between 2000 and 2012, if you didn't do a TLIF on a degenerative spondylolisthesis, then you were like doing the wrong thing, right?
Okay.
And now we're back to fusing some and decompressing others, because not all degenerative spondylolisthesis are the same.
Yeah.
So it's a very good example of, this decision making in spine and how difficult it is. I'm very jealous of my hip colleagues,
Yes.
Yeah. They're 98% excellent results.
Yeah. Everything is always good with them. So, and this leads up to the next question, because how much research is important, and also in degenerative spondylolisthesis, if we change our practice, is because of studying and doing research. So where you are currently the AO Spine Research Commission chair, where do you see the most promising field of research within spine surgery?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it probably varies depending on what domain of spine you're in, right? And we could look at the knowledge forms, which is a really good example of that. And, the spinal cord injury one, that knowledge form that's being chaired by Brian Kwan, who's a absolutely world-class researcher in spinal cord injury. If I think back in my practice, what's changed in spinal cord injury in 25 or 30 years? Not a lot. Timing of decompression, probably helps, but it's clearly not well, the studies are a bit mixed on that. Now we're keeping our mean arterial pressure up after injury, and we're um, looking at more objective markers in the CSF for neurological recovery. And that area is almost drifting into a bit of neuromodulation too, stimulating various areas to the exoskeleton and all those sort of things. So I think, the neuromodulation direction there is interesting. I think that the biomarkers there is interesting. It's just they're shifting gears a little bit. Deformity is another fascinating area because there's, unless they discover it at some baseline level, deformity is always going to be there. And now with being able to deal with large amounts of data, I'm sure that, and the imaging, and we're in our infancy now with putting variables in, putting the imaging in, and getting a plan back. And then the robot, helps you deliver your plan. So, is this going to make everybody, a Larry Lenke and, Chris Shaffrey when it comes to doing deformity surgery? Potentially. So I think that's a very exciting area with getting variables in and getting imaging in, and then learning over time with AI, doing the right thing in deformity. So I think that's exciting. The oncology world is certainly drifting to omics and molecular analysis. That to me is where the big areas are, and the other one would be on where I think we really have a void is dealing with recurrence, both on the primary tumor and metastatic side. Especially the metastatic side with these patients who've been fully radiated, they've had surgery. Now what are you left with? And they're still healthy, in a sense, systemically well, but they're spine issues. And degenerative. We've already talked about degenerative spondylolisthesis. But there's lots of different areas. Cervical myelopathy, a bunch. So I don't know if there's one particular thing. Each domain offers tremendous opportunities.
And in your opinion, that we are talking about research, do you think it's important for a spine surgeon to do research and also be involved in teaching? Is it an important area that we should, like, everyone consider to do? Or
generically, yes. Yeah, generically, yes. You can't do everything, right? Well,
that's a problem.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean you should go off in your own little silo and not, acknowledge or not cross-pollinate with other domains. I think this is one of the problems with AO that they've had in the past. They've stayed in their education silo, and they've stayed in their research silo, and even stayed in their, community development, incubator. There's all sorts of areas that don't necessarily communicate with one another. So amazing organization and amazing progress and output in each of those domains, but not a lot of crosstalk. And so I think that's a really key area. And we're just starting to explore knowledge translation. And so as a researcher, I finished a study. And what's the big thing with a study? You want to get it published, right? And you think once it's published, okay, I'm moving on to the next one. But people don't really read journals. The role of journals now is to go through the peer review process, and it's a great process. You should have peer review. But it's not like, I'm sure you guys aren't sitting down every evening and tucking into your Global Spine Journal and Spine and all those sort of things is, you have a scotch and a cigar. You're more wanting to know kind of what are the key things. You don't have time to comb every journal. So knowledge translation is a big deal, and being able to have a way to get it from publication into the clinician's hands is a natural for the educators and the researchers to collaborate and figure out the best way to do it. So it's a long answer to your question, but I think you got to be aware of both. I don't know if you can do both well
at the same level.
Yeah, but you better understand what each other's doing. And that's a really key thing. And a lot of researchers are great educators and vice versa. Right. But there are a lot of misconceptions between the two groups if you want to, create a dichotomy. And I think we need to break that down.
Yeah, I also think that I feel lucky where I work because I am in a team, and in the team you always have that person that is OR oriented, and the other one that is a great researcher. So if you're lucky enough, you end up working with a good team, and I think that's the key to our satisfaction in both research and clinical.
Well, Gisberto, I'll just say you've kind of hit the nail on the head there, because I give this lecture at a lot of, when I'm a visiting professor, rounds that it's 5 ways to avoid epic academic failure. And one of the principles is hiring the right people. Now that can be like, of course, hire the right people, whatever. Oh, thanks for that pearl of knowledge.
Yeah.
But when you start to dissect it, and you just mentioned it, you don't if you've got a team of 6 spine surgeons, you don't need 6 high profile clinical researchers, right? You need some people that are interested in education. You need some people that are going to stay home when everybody else is at European Spine and at NASS or at the Global Spine meeting. You need some people who are operating a little more and have the real passion for that, and get to work, with bringing in new technology and all those sorts of things. So you really got to create a team that has those different areas to focus. And I've seen a lot of academic programs fail. Oh, we've got so-and-so, and this. Oh, really? Well, does anybody like education? No. Does anybody like to operate? Well, we all like to operate, but not. I'd rather go to a meeting. That doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
that's true.
So, and we know. We hope we are not taking too long for this conversation. No. I'm sorry. How did you? We all know the SIN score, and you are the lead author. How did you end up with that idea and concept?
It's a good question. I've always been a proponent, and I learned this a little, some of this from Alex Vaquero, who I work with, who's tremendous visionary, great individual, and when you do research, you should try and do research on something that when you're in clinic every day, you're kind of going, I wish I knew the answer to this. There's just these cases you see and you don't know what to do. And the question isn't that difficult, but it just hasn't been answered. So we saw a lot of cases coming to us on Friday afternoon with, patients that have been 2 months on high dose morphine and in horrific pain with metastatic spine disease. And the radiation and medical oncologists didn't understand stability. They had no idea. And it's not their fault, it's just not part of their training. And even some surgeons just didn't translate, the appendicular skeleton to the axial skeleton from a stability perspective. And then in the neurosurgical world, there that biomechanics piece, that stability piece was not a big focus of their training.
Mhm.
So there was a real need for it, and there were smatterings around the world, and yet there was no real kind of focus on it. So that was the driving factor behind it.
So
And
you
we
had
had,
a good clinical question, an open clinical question, and you tried to give
yeah,
a response. Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
and yeah, and I think it went beyond spine into oncology, so it
Yeah.
really had tremendous value.
And on a more current note, any trends do you think that are getting out of fashion in spine surgery, and what are the trends that will always perdure in time and be always valid throughout time?
I mean, who knows what the world will bring next, but I think neurological, decompression of the neurological tissues is probably going to stay around for a while, especially on the degenerative, side of things. So I think that's going to be there. We're probably going to be doing less fusion, um,
Mm-hmm.
going forward a little bit with some of the minimally invasive stuff, the endoscopy, and our ways to do things as daycare may lead to a little less fusion, although, people are doing fusions as daycare too. But I think we're on a less invasive um, route. Now, I've seen a lot of trends come and go, but they don't
Yeah.
usually all go away, right? They
Yeah.
usually just get their indications reeled in a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, when DLIF and all the anterior stuff came out, tremendous indications for it, especially on the deformity side. But there's a ceiling on it, right? And people were doing everything with it and going, whoa, well, you can't actually do everything with it. So, we don't use cages as much as we used to in degenerative stuff. I mean, we already talked about degenerative spondy, right? But there are
Yeah.
certain cases you need it. So I'm not sure we'll completely fade out. There are some, look at disc arthroplasty, and it's different in
Yeah.
Europe than North America, but it's probably got a defined role in cervical, but it's still pretty questionable whether it's the right
Mhm.
thing in lumbar. So there's an example where it's sort of shrunk down. We thought we had the panacea, but in reality, we didn't. So I think the concept there is, each of them probably has a role. It's just not as big as when it comes out.
Okay. And talking about systems, do you think that the health system feature, public versus private, can influence the work of a spine surgeon?
Well, that's a good question.
Mm.
Well, I've got a good, I think, background on that from the perspective of, in Canada we have one payer,
Yeah.
but we still have a fee for service and we have a salary position.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody gets treated the same. Now, sure, someone knows someone, and there's always a little bit of that. But for the most part,
Mhm.
everybody gets treated the same, and they can't go out into the private system. They can go down to the United States and get treatment right away. So I think in Canada we provide world-class care. You just got to wait for it,
Yeah.
which isn't great. And then you guys have your two-tiered, for lack of a better term. Most of the world does. I think Canada, North Korea, and Cuba are the three that don't, which is, we're kind of in an embarrassing group. But anyway, having said that, I think a salaried position is optimal. I think it takes the variable of money out of the equation. And people can say they're not interested in money, but that's not correct. Of course they are. Everybody is. And you want to make money and you feel that your training and experience is worth money, and it is. The work we do is big time work. You know, we're one of the highest billers in the hospital. We work hard. We do high risk stuff. You know, we should be rewarded for that. But I do think a healthy salary is a better position than doing fee for service work. But it has to be the right amount of money. And in Europe, it isn't. In the UK, it isn't. And so people drift into private practice. And why wouldn't they? I think you should. And so you're left with trainees and others maybe playing more of a role in the public system, which has some advantages and some disadvantages as well. It's a very complicated, very, very complicated question. But if you had to drill it down, I think you should be on a salary, but it should be a very healthy salary.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for your honesty and response. And on a different topic, do you believe eventually we know you worked in a mixed neurosurgical and orthopedic surgery department. Do you think there will be a moment in which spine surgery will come out of these specialties and become one independent specialty? Or
probably the logistics around that are perhaps insurmountable. It comes down a little bit to money.
Yeah.
Certainly in the United States, the big billers are spine neurosurgeons, and so a neurosurgical department won't want to lose that. Similarly, on the orthopedic side, spine's a very big payer. But our program is probably one of the longest in the world where we've had a combined program, and we all do call, we all share everything. So I think we're a very good model for it. The only thing that differs is, spinal cord tumors, intradural, extradural, are handled by the neurosurgeons. But I mean, I've been in there and I go, I can do that. And then they get pissed off because they do have some intermedullary ones that are difficult, no question. And we were doing more of the big deformity, but I think we're coming closer and closer together. So it's the right thing to do, but I don't know, because of financial conflicts and everything else, it'll be very,
very difficult.
Yeah.
Still a long way.
Yeah.
Okay. So to end up our conversation, let's engage a quick game in which we ask you a question and rapidly with a quick and fast answer if you can. It's very easy. So, what is your hobby?
Number one, golf.
Oh.
And your favorite book?
Dying with Zero.
Okay. And favorite soccer team? And why Juventus?
When I was just in Madrid and saw Real Madrid play. I think they're my new fave. Well, I'm at an MLS level. My heart's on the Whitecaps, but Tottenham at a kind of EPL level.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Victor will be happy unless he's hates Real
I
Madrid.
am happy. Thank you, Dr. Fisher. What's your favorite surgery?
Well, it's probably an en bloc resection, but I'm getting a little old for it.
I knew this answer.
It's a
we
long
kind of
case.
guessed it.
So pedicle screw, navigation, new technologies, or freehand?
Both. Yeah,
That's good.
you need you need
Right.
both.
Open or minimal invasive surgery?
Yeah, again, both.
Both.
I think
Depends on the case, probably.
maybe I'm not allowed to say that, but yeah, I think you need both.
Yeah. It depends on the case, right?
Depends on the case, and you know, if you're just so MIS focused, you can get into a bit of trouble if you don't know what things are like open, and you don't probably know your anatomy as well.
That's true.
So I mean, you can it's like when we're using navigation. You know, and the fellows are like this. I'm not, you know, all they're doing is looking at the screen. I'm going, what the
Yeah.
fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, the screw or bonkers halfway down the pedicle, and they're still looking at the screen. Like you
Yeah.
can't change anything. You know, yeah, it's interesting.
It's
That's
boring.
your guys' video game era. You're too
Yeah.
technology focused.
A word to that defines spine surgery in one word, if you have it.
Ooh, thinking too much. That's,
Yeah,
I like
no,
it.
that's it. I was gonna say
Difficult.
you gotta. I'd say some courage. I would courage.
Courage.
Yeah, like it.
I like it.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so
Dr.
much,
Fischer.
Dr. Fischer.
Thank you for your time. We probably took you too much time, but
Oh
it was so
no,
interesting.
I enjoyed talking with you guys.
Yeah.
You had great questions. I really appreciate chatting with you. It makes me think. So that's good.
Okay. So we hope
Thank you
we
so
will have
much.
your support in this yacht club also for the future. If we're doing some initiative, we'll call you back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a great idea. You guys are the
Okay.
future. So keep up all this good work. It's really good.
Thank you.
Thank
It has
you.
been a privilege.
All right.
Thank you so
guys
much,
take
Dr.
care.
Fischer.
All right.